And with that, if you are able to turn your cameras on, we would love that. There are only 3 slides for this presentation, so it will be more of a discussion between everyone, and it would be great to see everyone's faces. Feel free to ask questions throughout the meeting. If you don't want to speak or you don't want to interrupt, feel free to put it in the chat and we will read it out, and there will be a question period at the end, so you can save it for that as well. With that, I am so excited to introduce Mike. Please take it from there and give an introduction of yourself and the topic today.
Hi, everyone. Great to join you for this conversation. My name is Mike Mclean. I'm the CEO at the Innovation Asset Collective. IAC is a not-for-profit funded by the federal government to help Canadian clean tech companies build the IP strategies and positions that they need to successfully compete in global markets and to increase the freedom to operate they need to access those markets. We deal with companies across the country and have a suite of programs that help advance their businesses in terms of their intellectual property practices. Happy to be joined today by Flavio Campanaro from Mirox Smart Technologies. I'll let Flavio introduce himself and Mirox Smart, and then we'll get into a bit of a back and forth on how they're growing their business and the role intellectual property is playing in that process.
Sure. Thanks, Mike. Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Flavio Campanaro. My current title is VP External Relations, but I've had a bunch of hats at the company. I started as employee number 4 or 5 as Director of Technology. And then as we've grown the company, the role came from doing everything down to smaller and smaller as the company has grown. My background's chemical engineering and material science. I worked at a few startups over my career. Most recently, before Miru, I was with Nano One Materials, doing the pilot plant work there. And then prior to that, I was in Toronto with a company called Vive Crop Protection, developing nanomaterial-enabled crop protection technologies. So yeah, thanks. Nice to meet everyone.
Flavio, why don't you pull up your slides and give everyone an introduction to Mirox Smart as well, so
Sure.
they can understand the context of the conversation we're going to be having.
Yeah. Bear with me. Sure. So Mirox Smart Technologies is developing a method of tinting windows dynamically so that you can control the solar energy in and out of the building and control the amount of glare to improve occupant comfort and energy efficiency in your buildings. We started in 2019 at the end of a lab bench in the chemistry department at the University of Toronto. 4 of us or 5 of us, depending on the count. We were making tiny little 2-inch proof of concept samples by hand that would switch from kind of blue in the clear state to yellow in the tinted state. That obviously wasn't a product that anyone wanted. So we and too small, but it was kind of the launch of the product. We partnered with some window maker companies that encouraged us to continue with this technology. They told us that there is a demand for the product in the real world, and whoever can crack the nut of being able to make this technology economically, because there are some competitors out there that do a very similar version of this technology, but they're kind of only going into like airports and really high-end buildings because the cost structures doesn't work. So we want to bring this technology to market affordably. So as we developed the technology, we got the windows bigger. We started to be able to do it on curved glass because of the way we make it. We improved the color of the windows. The world wants, the market has told us clearly they want color neutral windows. So we improved the color of the windows, and we further increased the size, and now we're starting to work on integrating the windows into frames. How do the wires get to and from the windows? And then this is a partnership with an interior exterior door company that we have. And now very recently, and I don't have a slide on this, but we're getting a ton of traction from the automakers because the current tintable technologies for sunroofs and backlights and stuff isn't meeting their needs, and now they're really excited by the attributes of our product. This door that I showed you on the far right here, we had some really professional photography taken. It kind of looks AI generated, but it's real. So this is a window on the left you see in the clear state, and then what it looks like in the fully tinted state. Just to give you an idea of what our product is. And this final one is the energy performance of the window. So this chart shows the solar heat gain. This is how much solar energy goes through the glass in the clear state or the tinted states. So in the clear state, it's wintertime or the clouds are in the sky, you can let the light in, have free light and free solar heat. But in the summer or on a hot day when the sun is shining in or you want to reduce the glare, you can tint the window and it blocks a tremendous amount of the solar energy. So this has implications on like building energy performance or vehicle energy performance because you dramatically reduce your air conditioning costs, particularly, but also somewhat your heating costs. So it's like a low E, it's like a dynamic low E where you can optimize the energy performance of your window dynamically. And yeah, that's our product.
Amazing. Thanks for that, Flavio. Great to give the participants an idea of what your technology is and how it's evolved over the years. Maybe we can build off that with our sort of first question to frame our conversation. Your electrochromic window technology is groundbreaking. Has the potential to eliminate up to 2 gigatons of CO2 annually. What are the key factors that give that technology a competitive edge in the market, and what steps do you take to maintain that advantage as you're growing the business?
Sure. So the core technology was founded on some technology developed by our founder, Dr. Berlingette, at the University of British Columbia, and then previously on some work he did in Calgary at the University of Calgary. And it's a solution deposition method to make thin films of metal oxides at ambient pressure and near ambient temperatures. The competing technology for making these types of metal oxides at high quality thin films is a sputtering approach, in which you would put the piece of glass in a giant vacuum chamber and sputter coat the oxides onto the glass. We had some engineering studies done estimating the energy difference between our process and that sputtering process. And the energy required to generate those huge vacuums in the huge format of windows is astronomical. And so we're using about a fifth to a sixth the amount of energy to make our windows. Secondly, the competing technologies that do the sputter coating, they build up the electrochromic layers layer by layer. But since it's in this vacuum chamber, they have to kind of finish the whole process before they can take the piece of glass out of the vacuum chamber. So if there's a flaw, they don't really know that until too late, and they keep spending money on that piece of glass. And then it comes out at the end and, oh, there was a piece of dust or something that ruined it. In our situation, because we're spray coating our glass, if we notice a flaw during the manufacturing process, we can stop spending more money on that piece of glass and time and reject that piece. And so our yield or a cost adjusted yield is much, much better. So.
Yes, that cost adjusted yield, that's incredibly impactful in a manufacturing environment. How is that something you see getting strong traction in terms of your ability to build pricing, or in terms of sort of the level of raw inputs that you need?
Like, so I'm trying to articulate the answer. Yes, the way we make it is much more familiar to the glass fabrication world. The glass is a very distributed business. Like there's because glass is fragile and heavy, and if you make an IGU, like the two panes of glass together is called an IGU.
Okay.
You try and ship that if it's all sealed with like argon gas in the middle. If you try and bring that up a mountain to get to the next province over, the pressure change will destroy the window
Mm.
as you come up and down the mountain. You can't put it on a train because the way they smash the trains together breaks the glass. So it's kind of one of those industries that hasn't all consolidated in one spot and is well distributed. And our manufacturing, or sort of our business model, is to enable glass fabricators to inexpensively install a Miru processing plant in parallel to their normal operations so that they can get into the smart glass e-window business as a value add to their current facility. So that the methods that we're using to develop our manufacturing technique, we're trying to keep it as simple and as close to what they already do as possible, so they're familiar and comfortable with it. And that's getting tremendous traction, both in architectural and automotive application.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought through the real localized nature of manufacturing for windows, but that completely makes sense given the fragility, as you said, of the product. And just thinking back to when I replaced windows in my house and understanding the options here in Ottawa, those are locally manufactured, so that's consistent. Just hadn't thought that through. In sort of building that, taking that concept from commercialization to, or sorry, from conceptualization to commercialization, there's always hurdles that you need to overcome in building a manufacturing process like you've done. Are there specific challenges that you faced in scaling up that manufacturing process so that you're able to port it into local manufacturers as you described?
Well, of course,
Yeah.
many little challenges. So when we were in the lab, obviously there's no space to handle big glass, and handling it safely is always a challenge. But I think it's Pasteur has that saying that chance favors the prepared, something like that. COVID hit just as we were kind of getting from like the 2-inch samples to making like 1 foot by 1 foot windows, and we had to leave the university. But the side benefit of that, we took advantage of that in that industrial space became available because no one knew what was happening in the world. And we found like an amazing location in Olympic Village here. And that we probably never as a startup would have been able to get access to. And we took advantage of that. And simultaneously, due to COVID, another smart window company that had been trying to create a similar but different technology in town, their financing kind of ended at COVID. And we had just received some funding from this SDTC and some investor money. So we were able to basically opportunistically grab their equipment and a couple of their people, and that really accelerated our launch, because that opportunity just showed up at just exactly the right time when we had the ability to do that. So that was a combination of luck and then executing on that luck.
The great point of you need to be able to take advantage of those good bounces that come your way. Not everybody is able to do so.
Yeah.
Those two topics really frame some important concepts when it comes to building a sound intellectual property strategy. If you go to any IP talk or any IP conference, the speakers will mention the need to link IP strategy to business strategy. And really, it's that thoughtfulness around the competitive advantage that you're establishing and how your technology or how other aspects of your business are enabling that competitive advantage. That really needs to be linked into a strategy of what IP rights are you going to need to create an ownership position around those advantages, and really secure that ownership on a go-forward basis, and how you can build that out over time. Um, if you can establish a framework to do that, it really sets you up for success when it comes to the intellectual property piece of your business. The challenges piece, or the overcoming of challenges, is often overlooked in that process. Um, Many engineers and entrepreneurs think of intellectual property as the big aha moments, right? Which for you would be the core technology around the window. But in many cases, the small problems, whether it be in manufacturing, whether it be in business operations, whether it be in some sort of side aspect of the product itself, really become core to getting a product to market and capturing intellectual property around those, whether those be in the form of patents, trade secrets, um, copyrights, if it's software or other technologies that lend themselves to that. Really help you build out that ownership position in a more substantive way than if it's solely focused on kind of the key aha moments. So that's what we like to explore, those questions with people like yourself, because it then allows you to build into what should a business be thinking about IP strategies. So really thank you for that description of where you are, and that sort of allows us to pivot the conversation into the intellectual property piece. Maybe I'll flow from there. The window space, as you mentioned, a lot of distributed manufacturers, so as such, highly competitive, and one that is fairly patent intensive. Um, Such a market really requires a clear understanding of the ecosystem. How does Miro go about identifying potential competitor threats, whether that's from a technology, from competitive intellectual property, business practices? How do you go about thinking about that and sort of assessing your freedom to operate and mitigating any risks that you found?
Sure, there's a lot packed into that set of
There is, yeah.
questions. So I'll take a stab at it. The foundational technology of electrochromic windows, using metal oxides, is kind of was developed back in the earliest patents or from the 1970s. So they've long expired. So the foundation of switching using this method is long expired patents. So we have freedom to operate in that sense. As we get kind of more specific, this solution deposition method is our core patent, our foundational patent. Nobody else is practicing that. The competitors are using like sputtering techniques, so they're using a different manufacturing approach to get to the windows. So where we kind of have to be a little bit careful is in some of the material sets, the very specific like ink recipes. But even there, between a bit of trade secret and how we make ours and how they make theirs is sufficiently different that we haven't sort of run into any direct threats there. But we do kind of keep an eye on all the players in the space. There's been a bit of a shakeout over the last couple of years. Two of our biggest competitors have failed in the last year and a half. And again, opportunistically, the one that was most similar to us was based in California, and we have hired at least 3 of their key technical staff, and we purchased almost all their research and development equipment and moved it from California to British Columbia. So we have again another second incredibly fortunate event from us accelerating our growth and our technology development.
Yes, sí.
And then the other company was a big player. They had raised well over $1 billion, and I think over the course of their life, 2 or 3, to develop their technology and build it out. Their business model just didn't work because their product cost and their capital cost to build it was too expensive. So they went bankrupt recently. So there's really not a ton of players in the space anymore. So the total number of direct competitors isn't huge. So it's not too difficult to like keep an eye on what everybody's filing. And then most of the other sort of patents in the space are around like how windows are controlled and kind of peripheral, probably additional fences there. And to be honest, we're still exploring how we're gonna navigate that space, but those are easier spaces to find either prior art or workarounds. So we're confident that we have freedom to operate, and we actually did a pretty exhaustive analysis for our most recent funding round. We hired some engineering or law firms both in Canada and the US to do an exploration and review our analysis of
Hi, my
freedom to
name's Kylie
operate.
Williams. I was wondering if the winter paddle was going ahead tomorrow. I didn't book in time, but I would like to come if it's going ahead and if there's space. So
Kylie,
my
Cindy
number
on
is
mute.
778-980.
Kylie, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Flavio, where were you?
I think I finished. Yeah, I was basically we did a financing this past summer, and part of that financing we had to do something resembling a freedom to operate, and we hired two legal firms, one in Canada, one in the US, to complete that. And so we're confident we have freedom to operate.
So I love the way you walk through that. That's almost textbook in terms of how we would recommend companies approach freedom to operate. One, you're not thinking about it as a one-time exercise, right? A clearance search and it's done and you're moving on and operating the business. Those are needed at times, right? As you just mentioned, you are seeking or going through a capital raise. And oftentimes a large investment will want to really diligence that carefully and will look for a formal opinion or formal analysis of that freedom to operate situation. Similarly, I think if as a business you were looking at launching a significant new product line, depending on the nature of the technology, those can be useful at those kind of key milestone points for a business. But what you described is really an ongoing understanding of the marketplace, right? What each of your competitors are doing from a technology perspective, how their IP rights are evolving over time with their businesses, how their businesses are performing, and all of that.
Okay, let the cooking begin. I'm cooking like
Can
3
everyone
things today.
please mute your microphones. That's thank you. Sorry, lost my train of thought.
They're doing a good job of going through the process.
Thank you. That sort of ongoing monitoring and understanding and use of that information to develop your strategies to ensure that you're identifying any risks. It should be really an active part of a sound business practice. And the fact that you're able to just sort of off the cuff describe an understanding of it means your leadership team really discusses those issues regularly, has a good understanding of it. So I think that reflects really sound practice and what we'd hope to see from sort of a business at your stage in terms of scaling. So congratulations, really well done, and thanks for outlining that thinking and process for yourself.
Well, the training that I attended some of your training programs, and even just that's been helpful in just getting awareness here and identifying the importance of it. So it caused us to invest more time and resources into putting patent committee together and meeting regularly and setting that up, and even just understanding the different types of IP. Because we tend to be all kind of scientist engineer focused, and yeah, ISC has been super helpful in just educating us on what patents even are.
Great. Well, very glad to hear that. And I think that's a key piece as well. IP can be incredibly complicated, but the core pieces of it aren't. And what entrepreneurs and engineers and business leaders need to understand about it should be really straightforward. You can leave the really complicated pieces to the outside attorneys, to the patent agents and trademark agents that do that work every day. But if you can gain a foundation of knowledge and then do that work consistently, and it's that consistency of meetings, decision making, action taking, month after month, year after year, that really can build on that success. So really encouraged to hear our education leading to more consistent practice at Mirox Smart, and some of the things you're able to describe as a result. Something that links importantly into intellectual property is just confidentiality practices and managing of a growing staff and how they treat your proprietary information, and think about that. As your team grows, how do you ensure they understand these issues more broadly? They practice or understand the confidentiality practices that you want to have in place, and safeguard the key pieces of your technology as you go forward.
Yeah, so that's evolving here. Like at an IT level, I can't speak too much, but we're using like a Google Suite, and you can control permissions for each document, and at the folder level. So that's one sort of pillar. Another one is onboarding. We have like an onboarding process, including a pretty detailed discussion of IP and your responsibilities there. Everybody signs their NDAs and IP assignment agreements on joining the company. So that's made clear. And then I won't say every time, but we have kind of weekly huddles, and every few huddles, IP is a topic, and we bring that up for a couple of reasons. One, to just remind people to maintain that, and then two, to encourage people to submit ideas. And did you solve a problem? Can you maybe say how you fixed something, and maybe there's some IP there. So that's kind of on that front. And then second part that's kind of evolving more is like our core technologies around the composition of our inks, and on the manufacturing process of applying those inks, and how we spray it, there's layers and layers to our device, and each one has its own kind of set of know-how, and we're filing on each part. Like there's a cathode part of the thing, and then there's the electrolyte, and then there's the anode, and then there's how they seal it together, and then there's how we put electrons in and out to control the device. So there's a whole controller set. So the device actually, it's really simple, but each piece has its layers of complexity. So there's no one person that knows everything. And then we're trying to file IP in each of those categories. And then also there's going to be some trade secret in that, like kind of our inkjet printer ink kind of business model. We're going to keep the manufacturing of the inks very highly controlled, and eventually it'll get to be a need to know as we grind down to a final recipe and a final manufacturing step, and there'll only be a few people that have access to that know-how, and that's what will kind of be the product that gets delivered to our customers. The other part of the product is like the support on how to apply the coatings and debugging, etc. But yeah, it's kind of like a inkjet printer model. We're going to try and get the glass fabricators to have the factory to make this as inexpensively as possible to lower the barrier to entry, and then we want to sell them a very proprietary ink plus the controllers and support package. That's
So that's an incredibly thorough answer.
yeah.
I think you touched on a number of really key points. One, people and processes. Right? Some of the major risks come down to what decisions your people make with your information on a day-to-day basis. So the fact you've got an onboarding package that is consistent, that they're all experiencing that same information. You've got regular communication or discussion on these topics built into your weekly or monthly set of meetings and discussion topics, and that's regularly occurring. That's really, really important. You talked about the technology aspect of it, so setting up your IT in ways to kind of reinforce those policies and practices, and have a technology solutions that aid in that, really can go a long way. And then having a framework for making decisions about what are you actually formally protecting using IP rights, whether that be through trade secrets or patents. All of that kind of creates a suite of IP practice that I would describe as sort of building an IP-centered culture. Right? How you think, operate, make decisions on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis really becomes a culture of the organization. And when you're doing things consistently like that and thoroughly like that, that becomes core to the organization and really can be a difference maker for you. So great to hear you expansively talking about kind of the different pillars that form a culture like that and how that can be built together. I did see a question come up in the chat about how you make decisions about what to patent and what to trade secret. What's your thoughts on those two avenues and how Miro thinks about that question?
On what to patent related to the technology or the decision whether to use trade secret or patent?
That decision between those two modes of protection.
When it's straightforward to get a patent, we prefer that approach because it's kind of a stronger protection. If trade secret leaks out, you're out of luck. So mostly there. Where it's more difficult to claim novelty or uniqueness, then you kind of have to be more in a trade secret. And then there's a balance of cost. Patents are way more expensive. So is this something that someone else could practice? Practically speaking, it's not so easy to get into this business. So there's only like a handful of players that could realistically kind of infringe. So yeah, I don't know that I have a clear answer because it's kind of case by case whether we apply, but it's a balance between how much we can afford to protect via patent and how much is patentable.
Yeah, so I think you touched on some key factors there in that decision making that I would recommend to people. So yeah, one is it sort of patentable subject matter, and you can get advice on that. Two is the likelihood of it being used elsewhere, and you talked about it. Trade secrets give you protection if from somebody inappropriately taking technology that you've developed, right? So one of your competitors hacks your system, or an employee leaves and takes information that's not theirs, then trade secret protections are incredibly strong. On the flip side, if a competing business develops a similar solution independently, then that trade secret protection isn't going to give you any leverage, and that's where a patent right does have more strength in that regard. There's definitely a trade-off in terms of budget, so available funds to do that. The other piece that I typically look at in that decision is can you discover, if you were to patent it, can you discover if someone's infringing? So would there be indications of use from their product literature? Can you acquire their product and reverse engineer it at a reasonable cost, understand what they've done, and get to an understanding of unlicensed use of that intellectual property? So that discoverability piece oftentimes should factor into that decision as well. You talked earlier about the education material that IAC has provided and how that's helped. Can you talk about how your membership of IAC has really helped you overall, and what aspects of our programming really have been useful for Miro?
Yeah, so at least a couple of us have attended like your workshops. Myself and my other colleague Kevin, and having like basically going in and taking a full day of patent learning about IP. Like it just day to day you're dealing with the day-to-day challenges of like the stuff flooding in your inbox. So like just to go away offsite and think about IP solidly for a whole day kind of really emphasizes that, hey, if our business model is a licensing model, we're an IP company and we need to take it way more seriously. So it was kind of like a kick in the butt to step things up. And then I know there's a little bit of funding to support some of this work. So that's been useful. I'm sure everyone on this call and trying to finance through companies in Canada is always a challenge, and every little bit is super useful. So there's that. And then I guess more recently, an opportunity to acquire a patent portfolio came up. I can't speak much to it because it's still an ongoing thing, but IAC helped advise us on how to on valuations of that portfolio and on sort of strategic approaches to entering that, and helped us review the portfolio and identify possibly some opportunity where portions of that IP might be acquired into the IAC asset portfolio. And I think you can talk to that better than I can on that detail.
Yeah, sure, happy to. And I think you touched on some key aspects of our program. The education piece is really vitally important to us. We're trying to create a suite of IP savvy entrepreneurs and innovators in this country that understand IP strategy and how to use it to grow businesses. So we have workshops, we have an online learning platform where our members can access that and learn at their own pace and own time. And that is directed based on our assessment of what they need to learn. So we'll provide a recommended pathway through that process. So that's really core to what we're doing. You mentioned the funding, so we have a series of grants that we run a few times a year to make sure companies have money to practice these things. We get that early stage businesses have limited capital, and they're going to deploy that capital to build out their product and to sell that product. And oftentimes IP is off on the side, and they don't have the financial capability to move forward with some of these things. And we're trying to fill that gap with funding directed to IP activity. And then we really look at, as businesses start to grow, the freedom to operate issue becomes more and more important. So we have 3 programs that are directed at freedom to operate. The first is a IP intelligence report. So we help study the patent landscape in a given field, as well as the market dynamics. So who's selling product, what are the technologies that are incorporated in that product, map that market information to the patent holdings to try and give a clearer picture of who's doing what and who has ownership positions that will need to be navigated to grow in those spaces. You mentioned the patent portfolio. So in many cases, early stage companies will get traction and start to disrupt larger players. And oftentimes those larger players will assert their patents back to limit market access. And if the smaller players doesn't have a sufficient patent position to counter that, they get really restricted. So we purchase patents on the open market and then make those available to our member companies as needed to protect themselves. Some of that we do proactively. We've identified a number of spaces that we think are really core to Canadian clean tech and are out. We've purchased 167 patent families to date. In some cases, we'll do that in partnership with a member company. So the situation you described where Miro had an opportunity to purchase some assets, we can help our member companies navigate those processes, but also can direct some capital into those purchases and potentially peel off some of the patents so that they join the IC portfolio and are available for the collective. We couple that also with an IP insurance offering. So having to defend yourself in a patent dispute is expensive. What we've done is we pay for a baseline of $1 million of IP insurance for our full members, and that baseline can be supplemented at our members' own cost, but at a discounted rate. The insurance provider has told us they're providing at least a 35% discount to our member companies beyond what they would achieve as an independent policyholder. So that's been a great win for us, and a large percentage of our full members take advantage of that program. So great to get a chance to kind of describe that for the audience so they can understand some of the value that IEC can provide. I did see a question pop up in the chat about the lot network and whether it's worthwhile to participate. So for the broader audience, the lot network is a mechanism to help counter patent assertion entities or patent trolls. So companies that don't practice technology, they purchase patents from other organizations and then find companies that are practicing those technologies and assert those rights to deliver a financial return. What the lot network does is if you sign up for that network, you agree that if you were to sell your patents to such an entity, that it would trigger a license to every company that's part of the lot network. So it's designed to take ammunition away from the patent trolls or patent enforcement entities. So there's a strong benefit to it. What it does, though, is potentially take away a financial avenue for an early stage company that if a company were to pivot away from an early technology in a significant way or would have to shutter, your ability to generate a serious financial return from the patent rights that you've developed over your time in business could be hindered. So there's some trade-offs there I think you need to think carefully about as an early stage company before participating, but there's definitely some value if you're starting to scale and get traction and are in certain spaces that are more active in terms of non-practicing entities, then you may want to consider it. Great chance for us to, I think, to pause and really open up for questions from the broader audience. Are there any things you're curious about and would like either Flavio or I to respond to?
Mike, there was a question from Jeff Kramer
Okay.
posted a little earlier. Did any of those get answered? Sorry.
I didn't notice who specifically was putting
okay.
one in. Can you
The first one was how much electricity is required to change the tint level? And is there a base state or does electricity need to be continuously applied to maintain the tinter clarity, which I believe is directed at Flavio?
Sure, but does Mike want to take a chance at that one?
No, that's all yours. That's all yours.
Yeah, so our window is essentially a really bad lithium-ion battery that's been optimized for clarity instead of charge and energy capacity. So like a battery, when you don't have it connected to anything, it doesn't do anything. So we use energy when we're switching the window from clear to tinted or tinted to clear. The amount of sort of power, we are applying less than 2 volts direct current to the window. It doesn't switch particularly quickly. It takes a couple minutes to switch, depending on the size of the window. But the power draw is on the order of 1.5 to 2 watts per square meter. So essentially nothing. And it's only during the switching period. When you're not switching, it's not using any power, and it will stay in the state that it last was in. Yeah, I think that over answers the question.
Francois, I see you have your hand up.
I was hoping to hear more about freedom to operate. And I've been through 2 exercises of FTO, most of which have been sending a query into a subcontractor in India, performing vast amounts of useless research. And the exercise I've always found to be much more in your face when you show up in a standardization call and then somebody says, we're calling for a worldwide standard, and you are advised that you have to disclose whether or not you are aware of the presence of any intellectual property on the topic that which we are standardizing. And that to me is the opposite. Caroline, the opposite end of the spectrum of the useless search in India, where then you're letting the industry speaks for itself and then like put up or shut up. So, which I guess is building my question, which is, how do you do a real FTO search that's encompassing? And in your case at Miro, have you found yourself I don't know, is like any standard for those kind of like electrically activated shutters that would confront you to really scout things from that perspective?
So I mean, our windows have to pass certain standards for use in automotive or architectural. The limit, we have the advantages that there's a limited number of competitors, so we can kind of review their patent portfolios, or our lawyers can do that for us, and identify anything that's kind of relevant. So to your standard question, that hasn't sort of been something we've thought about, but it's an interesting question, so I can't speak to it.
So I think there's kind of two separate things you raise. One, kind of the searching effectiveness, and yes, a lot of law firms will outsource that activity to lower cost providers in India or other places, and you end up with a huge dump of data that is not organized or structured in a way that allows you to analyze it. And if it is, it likely uses automated tools to create that organization, and the categories or labels they put on those categories to group the patents use terminology that isn't familiar to you or wouldn't be familiar to anybody really operating the space. I think to do that well, you have to put some thought into that structure, taxonomy, that organization of the technology space at the front end, and build out informed taxonomy that you will understand and work with the law firm or service provider to really focus any search in those key areas. And I would not do something incredibly broad that looks at everything as well. I think you need to look at um, much more focused pieces depending on the stage of your business, right? If you're an early stage company, trying to scour the ocean for everything possible is just the effort's too large. You need to bound that and really focus on some core concepts. Like Flavio, when he talked about their experience really understanding the marketplace, he broke down sort of 3 or 4 key components to their technology and an understanding of who was doing what in those spaces. And I think that's the way to get a more appropriate scope to that type of exercise. And there's some ways, like there's a lot of free and available tools where you can do some of that work yourself as well. It doesn't have to be outsourced, and you can get some of that started by just doing some self research as well. In terms of the standards participation, as you mentioned, certain larger standards bodies will have very firm IP policies and requirements in order to participate in the standards development. And I think that's where they really come in. Not so much if you need to have your product certified on that standard, but it's where you're participating in the development of the standard. They're going to ask you to disclose any relevant IP rights that you hold and potentially agree to FRAND licensing terms. So fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms where you're not using your IP to create sort of illicit advantage in the marketplace. So you definitely, before participating in those things, need to understand what the IP policies are and if they align with how you want to operate your business. Jeff, so you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I had 2 other questions, but basically I came a few minutes late, so I don't know if you already touched on this, but I'm wondering what the retail cost is going to be for this technology per square meter, if you have a number in that ballpark. And then the second question is approximately how much are you thinking that you might want to license the technology for?
So I can't answer the retail question. The challenge with the window industry is that every single window is different, virtually. If you go on in a building, even if 2 windows side by side look the same, do they have a second pane of low E? Are they triple pane? Are they aluminum edge seal? Are they polymer edge seal? Are they fiberglass edge seal? Are they tempered glass? Are they using a tinted piece of glass on top of ours? It's really difficult to say. Suffice to say, our competitors are getting their windows into like high-end high-end like office buildings and airports. And we're going to be undercutting them pretty substantially, but it's really difficult to say exactly by how much. And then in the auto space, there's some sort of competing technologies. There's one called like PDLC or liquid crystal. They have some challenges in terms of haze and need for continuous power. So we're on comparable cost to there in that space, but we're licensing to the glass fabricators and the tier 1 glass makers. So what we sell isn't to the end consumer. We're creating licensing deals with the fabricator, and so they would kind of come to here's how much production per year, and we're negotiating it at that level. So we don't really do it on a per square foot or per square meter basis at the consumer level. So a lot of words to avoid answering the question.
Francois, you have another question?
Yeah, those are product related questions. So imagine a greenhouse where you're not allowed to leak light out, and then where you'd be using your shutter as a way to prevent light pollution from the inside out. What's the transmissivity of your solution when it's in shutter mode?
So the current generation of the technology in the clear state, and this is just like a single pane. It changes if you add the second pane of glass. In the clear state, we can be as high as 70%. And in the tinted state, which means like 70% of the light goes through, which is not much different than an ordinary window would be around 75. Um, uh, that would be at one extreme, and then we kind of like have a band. And if we shift the band down to get on the darker side, then we lose a little bit at the top because we have to put more of the dynamic material. In the tinted state, um, for just our device, we're kind of in the 5% of light going through. And then for automotive application, we can shift that whole band down by adding another piece of glass that has some other properties that move it down, because the glass world wants a much darker window. To your question about light leakage, it's remarkable even at 5% light transmission, or 3 or 2 or 1, if it's bright inside and dark outside, and you have this blocking 99% of the light, and you're looking into a bright room from outside, it's almost as if there's no tint there at all. You can see right through. To get to privacy, you need to block something like 99.99% of the light. It's remarkable how little light you need to be able to make out stuff on the back. So we don't really position this as a privacy solution, more as a comfort and energy management solution. That said, there's one sort of interesting application in like in Florida, if you have a house along the beach, you can't have too much light pollution, because when the turtles hatch on the beach, if your house is emitting too much light, then the turtles will go the wrong way and not go to the ocean. So they have something called a turtle glass, where they use a heavily tinted glass, but that isn't ideal. Like in the daytime, you want more light. So our windows would be a great solution to do something like that. And I could see some like security applications if it does reduce the amount of light that's leaking out, but it isn't to the extent of a privacy solution.
And you're not going after the Luxwall kind of stuff, where the whole objective of the glass itself is to be highly insulating structure. It's really if you were to offer your technology to Luxwall, you'd enable them to have a shutter on top of their existing window.
I've looked at Luxwall before, and I honestly don't remember what their technology is, but
it's vacuum, like it's
right.
vacuum.
Yeah, we are the outer pane of a window. The architecture of the full integrated glass unit, the second or third pane, we're agnostic to. So we could laminate to a Luxwall VIG, or we could laminate to a triple pane, or we're agnostic. We're the outer piece of glass, and then that gets built into a window, and that could be anything.
I'm so sorry to interrupt the conversation. We are just at the hour mark here. So I wanted to thank you, Mike and Flavio, for coming in and speaking with us today. If anyone has any questions about IP Collective, please shoot me an email and I will forward you off to the correct people to answer those questions.